Hello, everyone. My name is Ernest, and I head up Hello Tomorrow's work in the Asia Pacific, and I'm based out of Singapore. As a brief introduction, I also actively invest in deep tech startups and advise them on commercialization and go-to-market issues. So prior to this, I ran and started the CVC arm of a publicly listed ICT company in Singapore, and even before that, I was in investment management, part of an investment committee overseeing just over $1 billion worth of AUA at a regional wealth management house. So let's get to it. Today, we'll be talking about deep tech. We'll be talking about the dynamics around deep technology and how as a deep tech practitioner or someone that's interested in the topic, you can start harnessing the promise of deep tech to your own commercial and economic advantage. So as a brief introduction, Hello Tomorrow, we started 10 years ago, and our ethos has always been about helping scientists, entrepreneurs go to market, because we firmly believe that rigorous technology is needed to solve the world's toughest challenges. So when we started 10 years ago, deep tech as a term was unknown, but now deep tech is part of of the vernacular in innovation. So I think we have succeeded in our initial mission, but now that deep technology is on everyone's lips and tongues, the work has magnified. So we believe that connectedness is important. We have 8 offices around the world, and we believe very strongly that we need to build on and access the top minds and innovations in all major ecosystems. So activities-wise, one of our core activities is scouting and sourcing for deep technology solutions worldwide. We do this through our annual global challenge, through which we get about 4,000 to 5,000 applications a year from over 120 different countries. This allows us to develop a very strong knowledge base as to what the most exciting innovations are emerging at the frontiers of technology. So apart from this, we work with corporates, we work with governments to future map, to scout for good solutions. We run incubation and accelerator programs to help startups accelerate their path to market. And most importantly, we sit at the epicenter of the global deep tech ecosystem. And we believe very strongly in building a more and more collaborative ecosystem, which we do through community events and discussions. And the last thing that we do is thought leadership pieces that we believe should be made public. So we do many of those a year and share these with the public as well to help them make the most and engage with the deep tech ecosystem the best that they can. So we do this around over 10 verticals: aerospace, computer and communication hardware, data and AI. You get the idea. There's no startup and there's no sector that is left out. And another thing we do is also build industry platforms around these different topics and these different verticals to drive collaboration between different stakeholders in academia, the corporates, the VC industry, startups. So our position has always been that engaging with deep technology is increasingly important for industry leaders everywhere. And the investment market appears to agree with us. According to our research with BCG, investments in deep tech startups and scale-ups have more than quadrupled from $15 billion in 2016 to over $60 billion in 2020. Interest and trust from corporates is reflected in these numbers as well. Disclosed private investments in deep tech startups involving corporates as their investors rose from about $5 billion in 2016 to $18 billion in 2020. So part of this rising interest in deep technology is driven by the notion that deep tech is being heralded as the 4th wave of innovation. So contextually, what does this mean? Let's take a short moment to understand the historical context of the 4 different waves of innovation. So the first wave consisted of the first and second industrial revolutions. The second wave was driven mainly by corporate labs such as IBM, Xerox PARC, with high caliber multidisciplinary teams that were strongly involved in the scientific community doing basic research. The third wave then saw the decline of corporate research and the emergence of small disruptive firms backed by venture capital, which later defined the Silicon Valley model, focusing mainly on IT and digital and biotechnology. Just as each wave grew from the last, the fourth wave is now gathering momentum. So think about the early 1990s when the internet was just starting to get traction. That's how we need to think of this fourth wave of innovation driven by deep technology. And the momentum of the waves are growing indeed. Just looking at the most famous deep tech startup of recent times, it shows the size of the impact. So Tesla listed just 11 years ago, but now it has a market cap that is larger than 6 of the next largest automotive companies combined. While its core business is that of an automaker, it has also succeeded because it has been able to convince the market that it is much more than an automaker. Unlike other car manufacturers, it never set out to just incrementally improve existing innovations, like enhancing fuel efficiency or lowering carbon emissions. It had set its sights very early on building not only electric, but self-driving cars. This was its big goal and dream, and the big problem in mobility that it was trying to solve. And really, Tesla is not an anomaly. We have more recent examples. The development of the mRNA vaccine by Moderna and BioNTech, two biotech scale-ups, is the other example. This is technology which for years had been regarded as being impossible. And it's not incremental innovation. The acceptance and development of mRNA technology opens a whole host of different opportunities. These companies that are working on mRNA versions of treatment aren't just addressing COVID, but they're also addressing long-term chronic conditions such as being able to produce personalized cancer vaccines, rare disease treatment, autoimmune disease. And once again, this has reflected in the growth of valuations of these new startups. Just have a look at it. Moderna had a recent peak market cap of $180 billion. And this is effectively for a company that's only 2 years old. And Pfizer's market cap, after so many years in operation, is at 300 billion. So for these two examples, and perhaps a few more that have captured the imagination of the public, there are hundreds, if not thousands, more exponential innovations being worked on by startups in collaboration with the hard science and engineering community. The most ambitious of these teams are working hard to transform entire industries, beginning with capturing value at the edge of where value is created. And this shows a clear message emerging from today's innovation landscape, which is that business leaders must start engaging with deep tech and all of the fundamental disruption that it will bring. So to start engaging with deep technology, we need to at least become familiar with the form of innovation that we are seeing. What are the overarching characteristics that successful deep tech ventures exhibit? These then will serve as points of reference for ourselves in developing a better understanding of what deep tech really means. So let's dive into it. The first, deep tech ventures focus on solving fundamental issues rather than optimizing or incrementally improving existing innovations. For example, like in the case of Tesla, building self-driving cars rather than just enhancing fuel efficiency. What this means is that they are problem-oriented in the very first place, rather than being technology-driven. The second, the deep tech ventures leverage the convergence of disruptive technologies. And when we look at our network of startups, 97% of them mobilize at least two. Now, this is not an attribute that is intentionally engineered, but it is the result of technologies being developed as the best possible solution among all possible solutions for the problem that they are trying to solve. So Patrice Kane, the chairman and CEO of the Thales Group, points out that deep tech results from the convergence of several disruptive digital technologies, such as cloud and AI, together with equally disruptive hardware technologies, such as quantum and nanotechnology, which then come together to pave the way for the next era of innovation and applications that will have an unprecedented economic and societal impact. So the third characteristic, deep tech ventures develop mainly physical or hybrid products, not just software or marketplace platforms. They are shifting the innovation equation from bits only, being digital, to bits and atoms, which include the physical world. They build on the ongoing digital transformation and the power of data and computation to mostly develop physical products rather than software. Dr. Roland Busch, President and CEO of Siemens, highlights that for him, the key characteristic of this wave of innovation is to combine both the physical and digital worlds, and that this combination can only be achieved through deep domain know-how, a leading technology portfolio, and a strong ecosystem. This brings us to the fourth characteristic, and it's that the growth model is based on having a central position within ecosystems. So being well connected to research, governments, investors, corporates, the links need to be there. And this is juxtaposed against growth in the third wave that was solely based or largely based on massive financing from VC and PE investors. So some of you might think that does this sound a bit similar to the corporate innovation model that we talked about in the third wave of innovation, the corporate labs? And there is some merit to that thought, right? So this wave of deep technology does indeed require very close, seamless collaboration between fundamental research, applied research, and industry. And in fact, there is nothing new in such a dynamic. So for example, the development of the laser was already based on these type of collaboration over 60 years ago. But what has changed now is that such innovations have become a lot more decentralized, and the intensity of development and the weight of societal issues that accompany the development of these types of innovations are things that have obviously changed. So let's take a step further. Looking at these four characteristics, you'll realize that they're not so much engineered as they are the product of emerging dynamics that determine how successful innovations are conceptualized, developed, and scaled. So our studies have taught us that three dynamics are simultaneously present and thriving in successful deep tech ventures. And these are advanced science, engineering, and design. So what's design? Design encapsulates the problem orientation, problem finding and framing, analyzing the context and the ideation. This then progresses to the realm of advanced science, which through a deep understanding of complementary subjects, such as matter and energy, computation and cognition, sensing and motion, then provides the theory to come up with the solution. Finally, this is followed by the engineering phase, which is necessary for assessing and creating technical and economic feasibility. And this might sound like a linear process, but in reality, these are things that need to happen in parallel. And therein lies the difficulty of the deep tech approach. You need to have science and engineering on the table from the very beginning at a level of depth and competence that can make a solution a reality. So if we break it down just a little further, there are some fundamental questions that we can ask ourselves when considering building businesses and solutions that can harness the growth associated with deep tech innovations. So the first is a design question. What is the friction or problem that we are addressing? And this process is something that many of you and many of us are already used to, but we are asking this at a deeper level because we are working with different set of tools that allow us to affect the physical reality, not just digital reality. And then the question that's associated with advanced science. How can we use science and technology to solve this problem in a better way that has not been used before? And finally, the questions that are associated with engineering. Can we deliver this outside of a lab and at the right price point? And so you might notice by now that these questions cannot all be easily answered by any single stakeholder, and that the answers to these questions and their quality will vary significantly depending on the stakeholders involved. So startups are usually in a pretty good position to answer the question relating to advanced science because, in our space, a lot of them are university spin-offs. Some of them, usually the successful ones, might come to it with a problem orientation already there, but will often lack the engineering capabilities, which later have to be acquired in the market. So it's important for for the founding teams of startups to be well assorted and well diversified from the get-go, and to be well aware of what they do not know, given how difficult it is for a single person to be able to answer all 4 questions. Now, investors will usually engage with these questions from the opposite starting point. They might have a clear problem or friction point that needs to be addressed, usually with a market size attached to it, some understanding of the science or technology, but usually little engineering know-how to evaluate the feasibility. The lack of understanding of the science and engineering aspects is very often one of the biggest reasons why investors are reluctant to invest in deep tech. But that being said, some very successful VCs like Flagship Pioneering and within the Euro-Asia context, Eurasia, have managed to master most of the dimensions or adopt a problem angle and at least have the necessary access to science and engineering know-how to support the right solutions. Now, let's move on to the engineering question. And, this is where the corporates come in for the scale up. Corporates indeed are actually in the toughest position of all the 3 stakeholders. They usually have the engineering capabilities, but lack the necessary problem orientation. And this is because this is simply due to incumbent bias, whereby corporates tend to improve toward existing solutions while lacking immediate access to the science and technology knowledge to be able to operate at a convergence of the 3 approaches, which is necessary for something to be 10 times better, not just create a 10% improvement. So business leaders who want to harness the potential of the deep tech approach should be very clear about the problem or friction point that they're trying to solve. They need to ensure that the right scientific and technological knowledge level is available. And at the same time, they need to embed a process that allows for cross-disciplinary co-creation and ideation. Now, remember, deep tech is not about bringing in-house the latest shiny technology. It is about enabling the convergence of approaches. So with this, I would like us to go through 2 case studies to help us understand this convergence of approaches between design, advanced science, and engineering, so that we understand each of the roles better. The first case study will focus on the issues faced in developing the future of energy, the associated challenges and options that exist within the solutions universe. And the second case study will delve into the future of biology, which covers broad applications from agriculture to consumer products to health. So to start off with, I have designed some contexts and problems faced in both future energy and biology. I've done some research into the context and challenges in consultation with a broad spectrum of industry players. Next, I will introduce the early stage startups from our network that are working on solutions for each of the dimensions that have been scoped. Now, with that in mind, that solves the design, that contributes to the design dimension and to the advanced science dimension. And this is where I would like you to come into play and lend me your brain cells. I would like you to think about the engineering dimension of the solutions that are being proposed to the challenges and contexts that we have obtained from the market. And think about it, remember, from 2 of the questions, which is 1, what is the friction or problem that we are addressing? And 2, the first question is, can we deliver this outside of the lab? And the second one is, can we do this at the right price point? Yep. So as we engage in this exercise, my hope is also that these case studies provide an understanding of the approach, but also, and perhaps as importantly, it gives you a useful preview of future trends into both clean energy and biology for you to contemplate and think about how these might be relevant to your own business operations. So let's look at clean energy first. Energy demand, the context is that energy demand in Southeast Asia is projected to significantly increase over the next 20 years. And for the sake of our people's and planet's well-being, meeting such rising demand needs to be met by significantly less pollutive energy sources. Now, let's move on to the problem framing, right? What are the challenges that we face in meeting this trend through non-fossil fuel means? The very first challenge, normalizing peak demand and supply. Renewables have not always been predictable, reliable, or secure. They sometimes fluctuate with the weather, and utilities operators often have to find ways to include distributed energy into the mix without compromising the on-demand nature of electricity that the population needs. Now let's look at a solution that's presented by a startup by way of advanced science. Artka Renewable Energy Technologies, which is one of our network companies, is developing a state-of-the-art CSP, concentrated solar power system, which provides modularity, cheap storage, and industrial heat provision capabilities. By using CSP and thermal energy storage as a mechanism for harvesting and storing solar energy, rather than PV, Artka is able to help utilities operators meet both base load and peak demand. So this is an example of a advanced science solution that's out there. So the question is, how can this exist in the real world at scale and at the right price point? That's a question for you to think about. Let's look at the second challenge. And that is that easy to access renewable energy sources have reached saturation. Well, as with all forms of resource extraction, many easily accessible sources of energy have already been cultivated for extraction, but energy needs in the region are still growing rapidly. And this requires tapping on sources of renewable energy that tend to be costlier, compromising commercial viability compared to hydro or carbon-based sources. So let's look at the solutions. One, the first solution, Seaboard Technologies, which I really love, is developing an inherently safe fourth generation compact molten salt reactor with a difference, right? Most importantly, the reactor, given that it uses CMSR, cannot melt down, it cannot explode, it does not release radioactive gases to air or water, and it cannot be weaponized. Further, the CMSR will be installed on modular floating barges, enabling full mobility. This allows for easy access to energy of fringe populations. So according to Trolls, the CEO of Seaboard, he even recognizes that places with poor meteorological conditions outside, like Southeast Asia, can benefit especially well from this solution. The next solution is this. There's another source of energy that goes unused every day that we seldom think about, and this energy source is waste heat produced in every type of production process, including energy generation. So up to 50% of consumed energy is lost as heat. If there's a way to recover waste heat, this would be one of the most significant means of increasing energy efficiency and reducing the environmental footprint of such process. Under a conservative assumption, 20 to 30% of this waste heat could be recovered, resulting in a 10 to 15% reduction in energy consumption. It's not a new concept, but existing waste heat conversion processes have been limited to a Goldilocks range, not too hot and not too cold, and suitable at only about 600 degrees Celsius. But companies like Craft Block and Polygy overcome this limitation. Craft Block enables the storage of large amounts of energy in a small space, coming from waste streams of up to 1,300 degrees Celsius. Polygy is, on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, processing waste heat that it's only between 50 to 200 degrees Celsius. Let's look at challenge 3. Extraction processes can be inherently harmful to the environment. And yeah, certain sources of clean energy, such as geothermal, can cause large-scale environmental issues. Effects such as greenhouse gas emissions, earthquakes, floods, and biodiversity loss all need to be appropriately managed. Advanced science solutions. EVER Technologies represents the world's first truly scalable form of clean, baseload, and dispatchable power by way of a closed-loop geothermal solution. It allows for the deployment of geothermal infrastructure without fracking, GHG emissions, earthquake risks, or aquifer contamination. So this really is a game changer, as geothermal energy is one of the few renewable sources that allows for constant, stable delivery of energy. Now let's go a step further, and let's look at Agora, which won our challenge in 2020. Decoupling greenhouse gas generation from the production of power has been a main innovation priority in the energy sector, especially in recent times. But what if we could go a step further and not only decouple CO2 generation from energy production, but instead produce energy while eliminating CO2 from the atmosphere? And Agora's redox flow battery consumes industrial scale amounts of CO2 during its charging cycle, while providing clean energy on demand during a battery discharge. So talk about killing two birds with one stone. So remember, think about your task is to think about whether or not what would it take for these solutions to be successful outside of a lab, and whether they can be operated at a right price point. Let's move on to biology. So contextually, biological products and processes form the backbone of innumerable organic consumer products, such as food and chemicals, and perhaps as or more importantly for health. We know that contextually, the quest for improvement in our well-being will not abate, it won't become smaller, it will only increase. And we also know that improvements in computing have started to allow us to understand and manipulate the biological world much more precisely. So using the mechanisms of nature to manufacture molecules, we are now able to engineer biology at scale. But there are challenges, right? And what are the challenges that we need to solve? This is part of the design problem. To feed the world's growing population, the agricultural sector needs to produce more healthy food in a decentralized manner, as well as reduce the negative environmental impacts of its techniques to preserve the biosphere of our planet. And well, one of the key trends here is that animal protein will, to a large extent, be replaced by plant-based diets and proteins produced by engineered microbes. But there is a problem. And the problem is that the price of lab-grown meat, even at large scale, and even when automated, is 10 times higher than the protein produced by microbial fermentation, and up to 50 times higher if calculated based on pure protein content. So a solution that exists out there, New Protein, which was one of our finalists at last year's Global Challenge, has developed a protein synthesis technology using wheat germ as the growth serum, but that lowers the barriers to cultured meat because it's 3,000 times more cost effective than the protein synthesis system. Simply put, it makes cultured meat price competitive. So there are many other interesting examples as well, that don't just deal with alternative meats, but explore turning farmland into a controlled lab-like environment using precision agricultural tools. But I'm going to move on today, given our time constraints. Second challenge. Manufacturing has always been about using machines and large amounts of energy to shape raw materials into products. Under this model, we exploit limited natural resources by breaking them down into relevant building blocks and building them up, reconstituting them in the manner that we desire. Now, however, advancements in molecular biology allows us to build tailored materials from scratch. So let's look at an advanced science solution for a material that will become very important to us in the future. Search Power Materials has identified a way to produce graphene from cassava. The incumbent technology used for producing conventional graphene is based on mining graphite, and this has a pretty negative impact on the environment. This new method would not just solve these issues, but yield graphene with increased pore volume, making it suitable for use in high energy batteries and ultra capacitors. And now to the third challenge, the big one. In biotechnology, the current hypotheses and discovery-driven approaches are not quick enough to cure all of the diseases that we need to cure. The first approach involves the design of a therapeutic drug against a cellular target that has been linked to a disease. And the second method looks at restoring health in a relevant disease model by screening thousands of potential drug candidates for the desired effect. And both solutions could benefit from the implementation of AI. So this now is the advanced science approach. Techsauce, one of our deep tech pioneers. Its deep learning-based algorithms have the ability to design new molecules. To guide the molecular generator, Techsauce introduces fitness functions for multiple objectives. The candidate molecule also has to be easily accessible using established synthesis routes. So this approach rapidly speeds up the simulation side of target molecule identification. And bringing physical form to such database intelligence is Cubotics, whose discovery platform offers robotic arms and AI models that learn statistical representations of compound properties. Its self-driving systems can dip pipettes into dishes and transfer liquids into other machines that then test their properties, while its models analyze the results and formulate hypotheses. The results of each experiment are then fed back into the system so that it continuously self-improves. So in this way, a library of thousands of material candidates that might lead to new products can be evaluated. So the question again is, can these solutions exist outside of the lab? And if so, at what price point? Well, I hope that the case studies have convinced you that there is a world of external innovation out there that we must engage with in order to stay relevant, to protect our competitive advantages. And the next question is how? Is it as simple as investing? Is engaging perhaps, is acqui-hiring a solution? Well, it's not that simple, and that's why we are here today learning from each other. So to us, there are two main models of engagement that we can learn from. And the fundamental concept driving these two models is risk and the management of risk. So what are the types of risks that are associated most with external ventures and innovations that need to be managed? They are, I would say, technology risk and market risk. So market risk is simply a question of whether customers will adopt or buy within my lifetime of funding. Is getting the product to market an engineering execution problem, or is it a customer problem? And the second, if it's technology risk, the question then is, can the product be built? And do I know the answer as of yet? Are there still technological unknowns to be solved? Looking at extreme examples of companies in technical industries with different tech risk and market risks profiles is helpful to understanding how companies can develop effective engagement models with external innovations to ensure that they're able to continue to be at the front of disruptive innovation while managing risks and costs. So let's look at the tech risk management model. Biotechnology companies are some of the most technologically risky companies that exist in the market. The lengthy development of drugs, the need to outsource financial risk, and the need to bet on multiple competing technologies have forced companies to develop unique models of engaging with external innovation. But there's no market risk here, right? You know that the products that are developed have a ready market. Curing cancer, your next problem won't be not where your customer is, but where are you going to keep your money? So how do large pharmaceuticals manage this? They work with external research and ventures by acting as acceleration platforms for such ventures, leveraging their assets such as production capacity, laboratories, go-to-market channels to help them scale up while keeping track of hard milestones. So in doing so, they are able to spread their bets and keep their finger in the pies of competing technologies. This is a mature blueprint that should be considered by others in sectors with high tech risk. On the other hand of the spectrum, ICT companies have low technology risk, but high market risk. Such companies develop external innovation through active M&A. So for example, Apple has made 100 deals over the past 6 years, and it's worked out really well for shareholders. What this means is that in such a dynamic, corporations need to be able to build the relevant expertise in their CVC arms to assess the potential of deep tech investments. As part of developing such capabilities, some players choose to work with funds that have significant success with both investing in and internalizing external innovations into business units to help form the next phase of growth. So within the context of, say, Asia and the rest of the world that we operate in now, this is where organizations like Hello Tomorrow and Eurasia come in and play a very key role. So most technical companies will have the capabilities will have to develop capabilities in both CVC execution and building acceleration platforms. So the question I'll leave you here today with is, which model would your operations be more similar to? Well, ultimately, we are in a landscape where extremely disruptive ventures are able to, with the deep tech approach, move very quickly from the top right quadrant to either the left or downwards. And to stay relevant, as market incumbents need to find a way to be part of the value created in this journey.
Over here at Hello Tomorrow, we have built industry platforms. We have done dozens of future mapping exercises and our deep tech discovery models that we have painstakingly built over the past 10 years with knowledge partners such as BCG, or over 100 corporate clients and over 250 research and academic institutions. These come together to serve you to develop competitive advantage. And we're also very happy and very proud to be able to partner with Techsauce on this to develop this model in Thailand to meet needs that are emerging from both the local and the regional ecosystems. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with Kunmini or other members of the Techsauce team, myself, to explore more how the startups, the ecosystems that we work with can be deployed succinctly to your advantage as you try to develop a strong core value proposition for your future through deep technology.
So if you found anything that I shared today interesting, please do reach out to us. I would love to have a chat. Thank you for your time today. I know I've overrun my session, but thank you so much. I would love to meet all of you in person one day.